I've been playing around with the new color mode in Adobe Premiere Pro. And I'd like to say the developers on this one have done a great job. It's surprisingly intuitive to use and seems very effective with powerful yet easy to handle features. And cool automations like pre-selecting certain color hues based on their appearance in the footage. In this video, with this footage I've shot in New York City, I will show you how with MIDIGrade's user menu function, you can turn any MIDI controller into your own panel for Premiere Pro Color. By the way, what I'm about to show you in this video doesn't only apply to Premiere Pro. You can use these tricks with any software where you would find yourself controlling things using your mouse. Let's start by identifying what we're trying to achieve. I've got an Arturia beat step here, which has a layout of 16 knobs in 2 rows, which fits perfectly our needs in Premiere Pro, since there's 8 adjustments I want to control, and each of them can be adjusted either up and down, or left and right. So I'll make the top row do vertical adjustments, and the bottom row will be horizontal. Then here are 16 buttons, which we will assign actions to as well. The way to think of this is that a MIDI controller outputs a CC message through a selected channel, which then MIDIGrade translates into actions on your screen. And the CC message carries a value, which can be anything from 0 to 127. In order to choose what actions MIDIGrade will output, use the references found in the user manual's MIDI to Action index. For example, this list shows all actions that are best suited for button presses. The actions listed here are triggered by MIDI CCs that are sent into MIDIGrade through channel 1, carrying the value 127. These green numbers here represent the CC number. For the knobs, we'll be using user menu, found here in the manual. Now that you know the principle of how this works, I'll show you the actual MIDI mapping we'll use today in Preset Library. We have the 16 knobs here and the 16 buttons here. I'll press Show MIDI CC and all these values appear. With this information, let's map our controller. Open the controller's software, select the first knob. It's either channel 6 for relative or channel 7 for absolute. I'll go with relative as I find the performance a bit more stable. And then CC 17. That's it. Now I'll just do the rest of the knobs following this same logic. All these knobs only take up 8 user menu coordinates since each column shares one. The top row performs vertical adjustments and the bottom row does horizontal. Once done, I'll repeat this to the buttons, but this time it's a mix of channel 6 and 1. Make sure the on value is 127, which it usually is by default on MIDI controller buttons. Now we can see some of the buttons are already working. We can navigate between clips and play forward, which turns into play reverse when I hold the shift button down. But we still need to make the coordinates work. So let's head over to Adjust Coordinates in MIDIGrade settings. This is pretty straightforward. Each user menu coordinate starts as 00, 0, which is the top left corner of your screen. I'll first use these buttons to move all of them closer to where we need them. That's the color panel in Premiere. And by pressing any of these adjust buttons, I can see where it currently sits and change it accordingly. Now we're ready to adjust them one by one. Press adjust, and with the keyboard arrow keys, you can move the coordinate where you want it. By holding the shift key down, it moves faster. When I'm happy, I'll wait for 2 seconds for this position to be saved, and I can move on to the next one. This all takes only a couple of minutes. Finally, the buttons I was talking about. Since we only need 8 coordinates for the knobs, we can use the rest for other things. Toggling the grade on and off, toggling color and contrast, and toggling color shift. I'll add zones for highlights and shadows, and we'll create coordinates for them as well, like this. Done. Now it works. By the way, I found the adjustments were a bit slow, so I recommend going to Color Control Options and play around with the sensitivity here. With this control, I like to have it set at 80. Press this link to apply this to both axes. Much better. Then, if momentarily I want this adjustment to go even faster, I just hold the 10 times speed button, and I can reset the adjustment with this button. Let's wrap this up with a basic grade on this next clip. I want to make this fresh looking and vibrant, but to get there I like to make everything quite neutral first. So adjusting contrast and then adjusting pivot. So coming way down with the overall exposure using pivot. Then adjusting the exposure as well. And I'm going to make the image a bit cooler with temperature, like so. And really boost up the saturation. I don't even look at the shirt at the moment. I'm just looking at the background and the skin, since I can now bring it back with the red saturation shift. And coming down with the luminance of the reds as well, just to really shut it down. I'm going to select the teal color of the helmet. And let's just adjust that towards more blue color. And now that I've done that, I'll come down with the luminance as well for the helmet, and then increasing the saturation. Like so. I'm gonna add the zones for highlights and then shadows. Select highlights and come up with the exposure. So here I'm just looking at the skin tones and overall like trying to make it really pop. And then I'll go to lighter, and now I'm just looking at the very specular highlight on the helmet and bringing that down. Let's go darker. And I'm going to just decrease the low end of this image, looking at the waveform. I'm going to name this adjustment base, and then make a new adjustment and call this one foreground. Let's use the object mask tool. With this one, we can make a quick selection of our gentleman here. And then I'll actually grab the ellipse tool as well. So we can drag it over here and then select intersect. So now it makes a selection within the selection. And this really makes it look natural, I find. Move it like so. Now we'll just create these zones again, highlights and shadows, and go to global. Let's actually hide the selections first, so it's easier to see what we're doing. And I really want to come up with the exposure here. So I'm looking at the skin tones. I want to make them feel really nice and fresh. Like so. But now we've overexposed the helmet, so I'll go to lighter. And now really coming down the exposure here. Coming down, down, down. And let's select highlights and come even further down. I just want to balance things out a bit more like this, looking at the waveform. Okay, new adjustment. I'll call it vignette. And then I'll grab the ellipse tool again. Zoom out and make a big selection like this. Make it nice and soft, and inverse mask. Hide the selection. And now, again, coming down with the exposure. I'm looking at the sides of the waveform here, making it really focused on our subject. This next adjustment I'm going to call background. And my thinking here is that our person almost feels like a cutout now, just because he's standing out a bit too much compared to the environment that he's in. So what I want to do here is make these two ellipse selections, make them nice and soft, place them like this. And now I'm going to increase the contrast. I'm going to increase it quite a bit actually. So that the highlights are somewhat matching to what we have on him. But I don't want this to stand out too much, so coming down with the exposure touch as well, like this. Now you can see it's a bit more balanced in terms of contrast. Okay, now I think we're in a pretty good position in terms of overall balance. The skin looks nice, the colors are not popping too much. So now we're going to create our look. In this one, now that I've created the zones, I'll grab lighter. And I'm going to start off by just bringing down the highlights, the very top highlights, a decent amount, and add magenta to them. So with balance, I'm introducing magenta to the very top highlights. Select global. And I want the image to have a overall brightness to it. And with highlights, now I'm going to introduce yellow, so we can see this in his skin specifically. Like so. And I'm going to come down with the saturation, so it doesn't look too warm. Select shadows. And with the balance now, I'm going to bring it towards cyan, like so. And I want to really increase the saturation as well. Yeah, nice. Okay, that's it. That's the look. And let's select all of the adjustments. Here's before and after. And if we just select everything after the base, here you can see how significant the change is as well. Very cool. Now, if you want, you can save the user menu profile you've created as a file, which you can then store or share with others. Simply go to Adjust Coordinates, click Save, and it will appear in your Documents folder. This is where I also store my other profiles, so I can easily take one of these, create a copy, rename it, click Load, and now I'm controlling color slice in DaVinci Resolve. Okay, that's it for now. I hope you found this helpful. Consider watching next the film I made using the footage of today. It's called My New York, featuring Kelsey Grammer. Thanks.
And then finally one New Year's Eve that year, I came back to the city again.